Robert Murray's fabulous, by the way. He I can't wait to see what he has. When Grichuk is the best position player traded at the deadline, how do you feel?
Oh, let's add him.
Is he here?
He's here.
Oh,
there you go.
How are you?
I'm great, man. I'm tired, but what a whirlwind of a last couple of days. How are you?
Okay, so how do you feel? Like, do you feel like if you went to a buffet and this was the trading deadline, are you stuffed? Do you think, I didn't love the selection? Where are you on this trading deadline?
I would leave the buffet and I'd go find a different restaurant to go fill up again because this one left me pretty starved. I'm not going to lie.
I was asked earlier, and we've got pretty much all the moves written down, who I thought was the best position player to go. And Grichuk, who the A's we just saw in Colorado for 3 days, I would have to say as an all-around player, he is the best guy.
You're not wrong. I mean, he's definitely he's firmly in that conversation. And that was basically the talk of all of these different teams is how weak that hitting class was. I mean, you're talking about Tommy Pham, Randall Grichuk, CJ Cron being like at the top of that list. And in years past, those would be like mid-tier guys. And these teams realized that those level of players were the top guys and they were asking for some really high prices. And that's why we didn't see that many deals made in the last 40 to 72 hours. And it felt like at some point the dam was eventually going to break and it just did not happen. And I think the high asking prices, the weak hitting class, and a few other different factors played into that and had probably one of the weaker deadlines in recent memory.
How much of it, too, was once Ohtani was off the board that just kind of changed the historical nature, exchange, took the sizzle out of the steak?
Oh, and it absolutely did. Yeah, because, I mean, we're talking about the greatest or arguably the greatest player in Major League history possibly being on the market to no longer being on the market. And if the Angels did sell Ohtani, then we're talking about a bunch of their players being sold. And as soon as that ended up happening and the Padres decided that they were not going to sell, the writing was on the wall for this to be a pretty underwhelming deadline. And it definitely delivered in that way. It was very underwhelming.
I don't know if you're watching MLB Network earlier, but they put up a graphic. And, you know, when guys are on television for a long time, like that's a long show, the deadline show. And, you know, they're seeing a lot of different stuff and there's a lot of stuff in everybody's ear. But they put up a graphic that made everybody on the panel go, whoa. I even went, oh, my God. I paused it, took a picture of it so I could write it down so I could present it to you because I wanted your opinion on this. Trading deadline deals from 2013 to 2022. Prospects traded 573. Out of the prospects of 573, only 3% of those became impact players.
Wow.
So if I said, you know what, Robert, give me your whole retirement. I'm going to invest your retirement, and you're only going to get this. Like if we went through money and went, I could not, but like they all were like, is that true? Like it just goes to show, or maybe we're just being sold this bag of goods when everybody says that, oh, you got to replenish your system. You got to go trade. If I'm replenishing the lake, I want great white sharks. I want bull sharks. I want hammerhead sharks. I don't want goldfish. And this stat right here, and this thing says you're replenishing your system with a bunch of goldfish. If you're telling me 3% of all the guys traded since 2013 who are prospects at the deadline became impact players, what does that say to you?
It says a whole lot to me. And it kind of reminds me of a Family Guy reference. I don't know if I can say that on the show.
Yes, you can.
Yeah, it reminds me of when Peter Griffin had to decide between a boat or what was in a box, and he was thinking it could even be a boat. And it's like basically the boat is a sure thing, and the box is a lottery ticket. And these prospects are basically a big lottery ticket. And I'll tell you that I did not see that stat on MLB Network earlier today. That is a wow stat. And I think that is something that these teams have to take into account is these prospects, they're lottery tickets. You don't know what they are. And when you acquire a major league player, you know, or you have a very good idea of what you're getting. And maybe that played into account on some of these deals not being made. or because there was a lot of players that I thought entering the day were going to be traded that were not traded. And maybe that played into it. Maybe it was the high asking prices. I don't know. But the fact that it was that low of odds for those prospects and those deals to make it, I think that says a lot.
Who are the guys that you thought were going to get dealt that didn't get dealt?
Oh, boy. There was plenty of guys. I thought somebody with the Yankees was going to end up going. I thought it was going to be Harrison Bader or Gleyber Torres. There was buzz when I woke up this morning that Torres might end up going. I thought, trying to think, I thought Eduardo Rodriguez was going to end up going. Like that deal with the Dodgers was agreed upon, but he did not end up going just because he ended up vetoing the trade with his no trade clause. I thought Brent Suter was going to go with the Colorado Rockies here. I'll even pull up the list on my phone real quick. I thought Clevenger was going to go. I thought Jose Quintana was going to go with the Mets. There was buzz that his market was heating up throughout the day, and I thought he could end up going. I thought Austin Barnes with the Los Angeles Dodgers was going to go because there's pretty significant buzz that the Dodgers are kind of moving close to moving on from him. And I thought that was going to end up being the time. And maybe they could do a similar deal with what the Pirates did with Austin Hedges and trading him for international cap space.
Yeah, it's when Grichuk is by far. I mean, then we were like, well, technically Jake Berger's hit home runs, but he's hitting. What'd you say he was hitting, Cody? 217 or something like that.
214.
214. We're talking about a guy hitting 214. People like the damn.
And also, actually, there's two others that I thought had a shot at getting traded today too. They're actually with the A's. I thought it was Seth Brown and Tony Kemp. And Seth Brown, I had heard his name mentioned with a few different teams. I heard the Yankees and the Astros were poking around there, and I thought that had a shot at getting done. But everything I heard from these rival teams was that the asking prices were absurdly high for him, and the A's held him in very high regard in trade talks.
What? Seriously, for the direction that the A's are in, the fact that Seth Brown's still here, Tony Kemp's still here, Aletmus Diaz is still here, Paul Blackburn's still here. Did I mention Tony Kemp? Like all these guys, it's like I'm shocked as young guys are going to be coming. You're going to have September call-ups going to be coming, and we got a bunch of veteran guys hitting 200. If you could have moved them, and you're telling me word on the street is we were asking a lot for our veteran guys.
Yeah, that's exactly what was happening, and I thought like with the interest that Brown was getting, especially from like as I said, the Yankees and the Astros were two of those teams that were poking around. You would think that he had a shot at going, but with those asking prices, it basically all these teams were like, we're not going to pay this. This is too much. And they could have gotten something useful for him in return for sure. And even then, like the switch knows for a second, some more players that I thought could have gone. If the Giants did not have those injuries to their pitching staff, I was very confident they were going to be trading one of their starters or bulk guys. I thought Alex Wood was a perfect candidate for that. And I was even told a week before the deadline he was likely going to be traded. I would imagine his market would have been pretty extensive because he's been relatively solid in that bulk role out of the bullpen, and he wants to be a starter. And I thought he would have ended up going, but those injuries prevented that.
Now, I just want to let everybody know the one thing about our veteran players, all those guys I just mentioned, a lot of them are in the lineup tonight. They're great people, and I root for these guys to go play on teams who have a chance. And if I'm a veteran player being on a team that's 30-77, if you're going to give me a chance to go win something, potentially a World Series, which is my childhood dream, people should want to let them go and to let them do that. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. Yeah, I think you heard me talk about the Giants. AJ Pollock, like you're the Giants. You have all this money. You AJ Pollock, like that's the best you got.
That blew my mind too. I thought they were going to be doing something more than that. And then at the end of the day, they end up getting AJ Pollock and Mark Mathias for cash. And that's the only move they make at the deadline. That is an extremely confusing deadline for me. I don't get it. In the organization, they're they're optimistic that they can get something more out of Pollock than he showed in Seattle. At least that's what they're saying publicly. But on the surface, I don't know how you sell that to your fan base. Like you're relatively competitive. You're in the hunt for a postseason spot, and that's all you do. Does not make much sense to me at all. I know they're in the organization. They're talking about the guys coming back, specifically Kyle Harrison. They expect him to be debuting in the not so distant future. But as far as trade deadline acquisitions, if I was a Giants fan, I'd be really upset.
The whole Houston Astros, what I've learned about Click and Crane, the division led to some guys leaving, Crane wanting guys back. I think you see two of them in Graveman and Verlander. I mean, when it's all said and done, I don't know when we'll really go back and look at it because the cheating scandal's over, but they're so dysfunctional. I was recently told by an Astros employee how they're just, it's still a miserable place to work. It's just, is it crazy how they continue to win despite all of their own dysfunction?
Yeah, I'll tell you, I was actually talking to somebody about it the other day, and the fact that the Astros, despite switching GMs, despite switching managers and being years removed from it, and they're still competitive, and they basically have not blinked an eye, at least on the field. And I think they deserve a lot of credit for that. Have they gone about it like in terms of where it was with Jeff Luhnow and now? Have they handled it like well? Or how do I want to phrase that? They obviously they've had a lot of blips in the radar throughout that, but they maintain being competitive, and I think they deserve credit for it because there's not many organizations who could have withstood that. And when it comes to Justin Verlander, he's been there before, and he clearly he wanted to go back. Like that was a spot he wanted to be. And like just to go run through his market real quick, obviously the Dodgers were involved, but they were never really optimistic. They were more pessimistic than anything about their chances throughout that entire thing. The San Diego Padres got reported today. That interest was totally overblown. They checked in just to see what the price was. They do that on every single player, and it never really advanced further than that. The Braves were always overblown. The Orioles, I think that actually did have some merit to it. I think they were firmly involved, but at the end of the day, it was basically the Astros or nothing. I think the Astros wanted him so badly. The Verlander wanted to go to the Astros, and that's how they got it done. And despite being in that culture before, he wanted to go there again.
Is it doing your due diligence in San Diego, or does AJ Preller just want everybody to think he is on everything? He is in on everything.
Oh, he is on everything. I can confidently tell you that. It is remarkable. There was a team that I talked to early this morning, and they said that when you deal with Preller, you got to know that he has 15 other things going on, and you got to be mindful of that. And he is, and he checks on everything. He has a pulse on everything that goes on throughout the league because he wants to know who's available, what the price is, and if there's an opportunity to add a player at a price that he thinks is good, he wants to pounce on it. And that's exactly how he identified Garrett Cooper with the Marlins, because he was not mentioned in trade rumors once. Scott Barlow, he was a little bit, but not too much. And at the end, he ended up getting both those players. And immediately after those deals were made, I was getting texts saying Preller does it again. And this is exactly what he does. And I tip my cap because I don't know how he sleeps or if he sleeps, but I just marvel at his ability to constantly do this because there's no other executive in baseball who does it.
I'm still shocked he has a job. I mean, all these years he's been in, he's punted, he's been in, I mean, it's been, most guys wouldn't have this long of a leash. Speaking of a leash, and right now I'm on FanSided.com right now in your guys' baseball section, and a picture of Chaim Bloom. Chaim Bloom left Red Sox fans with disappointing. How long does this guy continue to be able to operate the way he operates and to have one of the best jobs in baseball?
That is a wonderful question. The last two trade deadlines for him have been extremely confusing. It has been, last year it was like a mixture of buying and selling, and it did not work at all, especially after trading Vasquez to Houston and facing him immediately. Like you could tell as soon as that trade was made, that organization or the players were not happy with it. And this year, you look at that roster and you could see Adam Duvall being a trade candidate. You could see Alex Verdugo, James Paxton being trade candidates. And instead, they go out, they don't sell any of those guys, and they go out and get Luis Urias from the Milwaukee Brewers, which I actually think that's a halfway decent move. He's a high upside guy, super toolsy. He was a former top prospect with the San Diego Padres, but he's never really put it together quite yet.
Hey, he's hitting like 157 in 20 games, something like that.
Yeah, not great. That is definitely not encouraging numbers, to say the least.
I don't think they're having like a rollout party with the red carpet when he rolls up to Fenway.
No, gosh, no. And with the interest that they got in Paxton and they got in Duvall, they could have gotten something. They could have gotten something meaningful in return. Philadelphia was firmly in on Adam Duvall throughout this entire process, and they did not end up pulling the trigger on a deal. And that for a team that basically has little shot at winning the World Series this year, I thought Chaim Bloom should have ended up doing it and pulling the trigger on those deals, but he did not. And either he's going to miss the playoffs or it's going to be a quick exit in the postseason, and they're just going to be, in the same spot as they were last year. And that just, it's not great. And it makes you wonder about his job security long-term, because that fan base in Boston is passionate. They booed him last year at a convention before the season started. And I can't imagine they're as I can't imagine they're more happy than they were at that point either.
Is our game just in a weird spot? Like, we're talking about the Red Sox, and then I'm now going to ask you about the Mets, who had the biggest payroll in the history of baseball. I believe it's his biggest payroll in the history of American professional sports, and X amount of months later, they're punting. And man, remember where we were like at the winter meetings and just after the winter meetings, and Steve Cohen, and he's the super fan, and $16 billion. I was joking with my producer earlier, Cody, about, he loves Seinfeld, and Keith Hernandez was his favorite player, and he's just like us. He's the fan. And then now they're like, we might not compete till 25, 26. Just how weird is our game right now?
It's extremely weird. And sticking with the Mets, nobody could have ever envisioned this happening with the Mets. That was a team that on paper looked like the strongest candidate to represent the National League in the World Series. You had 2 Hall of Fame pitchers heading up your rotation. You had some really solid starters rounding out that rotation. Had a lineup that was full of guys that are extremely talented, that are led by Pete Alonso and Lindor. And then a few months later, you trade your 2 Hall of Fame pitchers. They were listening to offers for Pete Alonso. Like that was real. And
that's crazy.
Yeah. And the fact that Billy Epler and Steve Cohen were as open as they were with with Scherzer about not competing in 2024 and then aiming for 2025, that is shocking. That is probably the biggest 180 in recent baseball history. Like, that is completely stunning, and it's left this game in a really weird spot. And considering the Mets and the Padres' lack of success after they spent $1 zillion in the offseason, I wonder if that's going to dissuade these teams from spending that kind of money going forward and kind of doing what these other teams are doing. I thought those 2 teams spending as much as they did was awesome for the game. It has not worked out. The Padres still to be determined. They continue to add at the deadline, doing what AJ Preller does. But this entire season for the Mets might be the biggest disappointment in baseball history. It's been that much of a failure.
Well, keep doing what you do, because you're one of the best we got in this business, and we always appreciate having you here on A's Cast Live, and let's do this again soon.
Let's make it happen. I appreciate you guys having me, and have an awesome night.